Thank you and good evening. Before I go into those lessons, I want to show something, because we are very busy this last weeks with our national soccer or football team, because we have the European Championship, and well, I think a lot of you may know it, but for the Dutch that's very important, and that means that our whole country is slowly getting more orange. So if you stay longer, you will see it getting more and more orange like this. This is the, and you can see orange cars and all kind of things orange. As long as it's orange, it's okay. Until we lose, then it's over. And we mostly lose somewhere. Okay, but I want to talk to you about water, and first thing also I want to mention is that water is not only important for us in summer, of course it is, but also in winter, because we really like to skate, and this doesn't look like water, but it's ice, and we like ice skating, so this is one aspect of water. But what's more important, and when I talk about, let's say, the lessons learned, I want to talk about water management in the Netherlands. And as you see here, the Netherlands is a very low-lying country. That means that part of the country is below sea level, and along the rivers there are also parts that are below the levels of the sea. So a lot of a big part of the country is vulnerable for floodings, so that's very important to understand. And that's why we also are so keen of let's looking at our water management. But we have made many mistakes, and I will show them afterward. Just the first some impression. If you look here, then you see a bird's eye view of the landscape. In the south, Delft and The Hague and Amsterdam, and we're now a little bit north of Amsterdam, somewhere where this A7 is called. And this is when there's no problem and low sea levels, but suppose we didn't have our defense against the sea, then what would happen? What would happen during low tides would be something like this. There's a lot of the country is underwater. And high tide, so this happens then every day, high tide is even worse. So you understand that water management is a fight for the Dutch, and especially also because most of the people who are living in the Netherlands are living in this area which is below the sea level. And also the economy, mostly of it is concentrated there. So for us, the defense against flood is very important, and especially also from the sea. And here you see the Dutch coast, and we have, in general, we have, let's say, a soft defense. What we call is that we use sand from the sea to keep our dunes intact. But at some places we need hard defense, like dams, just to protect us from the sea. And this has to be controlled over and over again because it's so very important. But let me go to how we did get our policy. And in fact, what happened is that we learned a lot from our mistakes, and that's in fact how our policy became a reality, because we made many mistakes, and I will show some of them just to make you understand how we did it. During the centuries, we had many problems, many flood problems, and here you see a picture of dike breaches over the, let's say, the last 300 years, 250 years, and there are many of them, and these are mostly in the river area. And so many dike breaches we had that many people were killed, 10,000s of people during all those years. So that was a hard lesson to learn, and it also was the reason that at a certain moment it was decided that we could not, let's say, make solve the problem by every time restoring the breach, but we should have a policy where all the river branches are in, and then there was a special organization made. It's called the Rijkswaterstaat, which is the national organization for water management for our big waters. And what we saw is, and what we did wrong, is that we were too much fragmented in our river management. There were local problems, but then we solved them with local projects with not a combined approach. The other thing is that if you make a solution for a local problem, then you can have downstream, you can have even worse problems. And also there was no thinking and no policy of water management on a river basin scale. So we, as I said, had to learn that, and that's why this state organization was made. It doesn't mean that then all the problems were solved, but it was an important step in it. This is another part of the country. It's very near where we are. I think we're about here now, Volendam. And it used to be an inner sea, you can say. It was in connection with the North Sea. And what happened is that there were so many floods that attacked the land that the sea became bigger and bigger. And there were always situations with damage and with people who were killed. And then there was in 1916 there was a serious flood again. And there were not so many people killed, but there was a big difference, damage again. And then the government decided on plans that were already made before to make them, to realize them, and these plans were called the Zuiderzeeworks. And it more or less, the principle is that, let's say, this Zuiderzee, which you can see is in open connection with the North Sea, that we wanted to close this sea, this inner sea from the North Sea. So first we made a polder just to test out if we could make those dikes. This was the first step, and it was done in 1930. And so we also got some new land there. And then when we succeeded in that, we made this dam. It's called the Afsluitdijk, and this closed, let's say, this inner sea from the North Sea. And this also meant that this inner sea became slowly a freshwater reservoir, because the river, one of the branches of the River Rhine is flowing into this sea, and slowly the salt water is disappearing and is, let's say, becoming freshwater. And this is also very important for our water management. But it was also possible, as I showed, to make polders here, and this was part of the plan, to make new land. And in 1948 there was a new polder made, Noordoostpolder it was called, and you can see there were two islands which used to be in the sea. They were now inside the polder. And we went on like that. There came another big polder in 1957. And still one in 1968, and they had, of course, the advantage that there was new land, which was possible to use it for agriculture and so on. And then there were ideas to make another polder. It should be the Markabatic in the southwest end, but then there came protests from the people, and they said, well, we have put away, or let's say, taken in too much water, we should not go on with that. So only the first dam of this polder was made, and it's now a connection with a road on it, of course, but this other polder was never made. But it shows, let's say, that the problem of this vulnerable area with many people killed, with a lot of damage, it was more or less finished by making this dam, this Afsluitdam, disclosure dam, and also using the land also for agriculture and so on. So it was a better safety, better water management, because we have this fresh water reservoir now, better connections, because you could drive from one side to the other, soils for agriculture, space for cities, and also natural areas. So that was a lesson learned in the north. Then we got a very big attack in 1953 in the southwest of the country. Here there was a province which is called Zeeland, and in 1953 there was a very big storm, and a lot of dikes were breaching, and a lot of people came into problems, and we had about 2,000 people killed in a few days, and this was really a terrible disaster. And that was again such a learning moment. We should have done it before, of course, but then the government said this should not happen again. So they decided to, as a reaction, to start what they call a Delta project. And I can only tell you, let's say, some headlines of it. This is, let's say, one of the last things of this Delta project which was made. It was an open dam, so in general the connections to the sea were closed, but the last closure, let's say, they made a dam where water could still go in and go out, so this was better for ecology and for nature, so that's the reason why it was made like that. But it's a very huge construction, and it was a very big project, and this one was finished in 1986. Then there was another point which became more and more dangerous, and which asked also for a solution, was the area of Rotterdam and around Rotterdam, where when you have very high sea levels, you get problems with flooding, and for this there was a new construction made. It's kind of a turning construction. It floats on the water and then can be sink down, and these two arms that are made, they are very big. One of them is as big as the Eiffel Tower in Paris, so you can understand how huge this construction is. And when the water level is about 3 meters above normal sea level, then it closes automatically. It's not possible to, it's done by people, just by the computers. And then, let's say, it protects Rotterdam area from the sea. Well, of course, the problems were not only problems of, let's say, water quantity and flooding, but also problems of water quality. And only after, let's say, the problems were very big and the water was very bad in a lot of places, then they decided to make a new law. And this law, the Water Pollution Act, was put into practice in 1970. And then already they thought the first draw was made, about 100 years ago. So it took a long time to decide. Only when the problems were big they decided to do this. And we were in general quite successful in working on this water quality. We worked together in the Rhine area with the other countries along the River Rhine, like Germany, France, Switzerland and Luxembourg. And the Rhine became slowly a better river, and then what happened is that there came an accident in Switzerland with a factory producing pesticides. And again, this accident led to new actions, because we said we need to make a new action plan for the River Rhine, because all the pesticides they went into the water. You get a lot of dead fish. The ecology was really disturbed, and so this was the reason why there was another action. And well, if you look at our policy, our water pollution policy, which started after this problem. You can say that we had some weak points, and the weak point was that we only started when the problems were big, and that we need disasters. But our strong points were that we did have a really clear vision for the future. We said, okay, we wanted to clear our water in 20 years. And also we succeeded in doing that. It's very, very important to be sure to have an idea what you want to reach in what time. We made a dedicated law, which was also important to have. The organization was very well arranged, and it was clear who had to do it, and it was also organized well. And what was one of the most important things also, there was a very good financing structure. And for instance, everybody who was polluting, they had to pay, the polluter pay principle. And we used the paying from the industries to give them subsidies again to make purification plants. And so it really was a very good policy, you could say. Then we already had a long time in the 90s that we did not have high river floods. And in that time, everybody used to say, well, it won't happen anymore. It's something from the past, and everybody was convinced that the dikes were high enough, and that people who said that the dike were not high enough, they just wanted to have work for themselves or something like that. And there was not enough money to spend on that. And then we had 2 years in a row, we had high river floods, and then everybody was shocked, because how could this happen? And some 200,000 people had to leave their home because there was a danger that it would be flooded and that they would get drowned. So if 200,000 people have to leave their home, then it's a big catastrophe, you can say, and it really makes a big impression. So again, we needed this almost disaster, you can say, to make a next step, and to say, okay, we have to deal with these rivers in a better way. And I already told this. What we did in the past is that we really made our rivers. We put away taken away all the room from the river, and what we did, we made more or less canals like small rivers with high dikes alongside it, and we thought that was very sensitive, but on the other hand, it was not, in the end, it did not seem to be such a good policy. So we said we cannot go on this way, we should also try to give more space to the river. So this became an important project. And here you see another example why these river problems occurred, because in the past there was quite a lot of room for the river, a lot of space, and by building cities, the river narrowed, and you get higher, let's say, water levels because of that, and more danger of flooding. So then it was decided, again, after an almost catastrophe, I should say, that we should have a project which was called Room for the River, and this project should be finished in 2015 and should lead to better situation in the river area. And one of the goals of the aims was safety, but it was combined with another one, because we said we can, at the same time, we can also take care of a better spatial quality. So it's a combination of goals, you could say. And what we also found important is that it should be a project which looked at the whole river system, but it should also be a cooperation between all the government levels. So what we did is that we worked together with 3 ministries, 5 provinces, 16 water boards and 100 municipalities to make this big plan for this Room for the River. And in the end, it were almost 40 projects that were selected to carry out. And it's very important that, let's say, as I said in the beginning, that you cannot just take one spot and make more room there. If you have to do it, you have to look at all the branches in the whole river system. You see an example of one of those projects. Is in the southern part you see the city of Nijmegen, and in the northern part there will be an extra branch of the river which will cut off a piece of land, so that will be kind of an island, but that gives the river more room again. And at first everybody was against it, but by looking at what the possibilities are and what the potentials are, people became more and more enthusiastic, and a lot of them are so enthusiastic because you can make new part of a city there, people living near the water, and the safety is better than before. This one is an example of a bypass. That you make, let's say, a green river, which is not used in normal times, but maybe once in 100 years it's necessary to use it, because then you have so much water in the river that the normal river cannot cope with it, and then you have this green river. And so this bypass can help you also to get more room for the river. Okay. And one example also I want to give is interesting, is an area which is called Noordwaard. It's a polder area. You see the red lines are the polder, are the dikes around that area. And in the past it used to be a lot of water. It was in an open connection with the river, as you can see here. And because it became a polder area, then the room for the river had disappeared, and that meant also that upstream from this part the water levels were higher, and the danger of flooding was higher. So something had to be done, and it was decided that we should look if we could restore this situation again as it was in the past. So this was a kind of a sketch. You can see the river flowing there, and well, the people looking, can we use this area again for storing the water if there's a lot of it. But of course there are, let's say, people living there, and there are farmers there. So it's a difficult situation if you have to decide that. But what we did is that we said we should have this process together with all the inhabitants and the stakeholders. We should try to find out the best solution for everybody, so that they understand why is it necessary, how can we cope with the disadvantages for them, can we compensate them in one or another way, or can we give them possibilities in the area, also in the new situation. And then by talking there came an alternative which was, let's say, designed by the people themselves, and this led to an alternative that was also chosen at the end by the State Secretary. And it looks a bit like this, that you see those open connections again, and some of the areas will be nature and are not so vulnerable. Of course they can have water without problem, but some others can be used as agriculture area, and it means that the farms have to be at the right level, of course, that they will not get trouble with it, so there will be new farms there. And this is how it was done. We call it working on the kitchen table. So people sit together, they make plans, they look, can we have another alternative and things like that. So this process is very important to get successful. You see a situation when there's relatively low levels of water, then there is more water in this area than before, but it's not a lot more. This is when you get situations when there is a higher flow, then you need more of the area. You can have even a situation that you need even more of the area, and in the ultimate situation, when there's really a heavy floods, this would be what happens. And of course, then it may happen once in 1,000 years, for instance, if you calculate it. It will not happen often, but if it happens, then people get compensated, the farmers, for their loss of crop, and also they, of course, get compensated now for restructuring this area. And this project it just started a few weeks ago, was in realizing, so it's important. Well, what did we learn from this? That it's necessary to have an integrated approach, to involve all the government levels, communicate with the stakeholders, consider all relevant aspects, consider all possible measures, and use policy analysis as a tool. After that, after 1993 and 95, where we had this river floods, we had problems with excess rain inside the country, so in the polar areas, and it was raining so hard that we couldn't cope with the rain. And well, again, we said we did not look out very good before, because there was urbanization, there was, and we didn't. Let's say we didn't predict that this was going to happen. So again, we said there must be more space for water also inside these polar areas, and we have to look for retention areas. And well, the last 10 years or so, 50 they are being constructed. Important conclusions of the experience in the Netherlands is that we too often need a disaster or a nearly disaster. And what is important is that you look at systems that are resilient. And also a very important aspect is that spatial planning and water management should be very good connected, because often spatial planning is not looking at the consequences for water, and then later on you get a problem. So from the beginning you have to look at what does a plan mean for the water situation. And this is why we developed an instrument in our law which is called water test or water assessment. And that means that with every decision there has to be made clear what is the effect on the water situation. But what if climate change goes on? Because what I said now is that in fact all our policy was based on mistakes. So we made a mistake and then we made a new policy, and made another mistake and we made a new policy. And okay, you can do it like that, but it's better to look ahead. And so we said we have to make a plan for the future, and we have to look a long time ahead, like 100 years if possible. And that's why, let's say, here, for instance, there's a calculation made with of what could happen if the climate changes go on. It's of course one of the scenarios. It's not the only scenario, but then you can see that there are areas where the water level could be 1 meter 20 higher than they are now, and that means that we have to be prepared for that. And also that's the reason why the government said, well, okay, let's just start a national dialogue on our future situation. Although we know it's not really urgent, it won't be tomorrow that this will happen, but we have to look 50 or 100 years ahead, what could happen. And we use let's say the scenarios of global warming, and look what could it mean for the sea level, what could it mean for rain, and so on. And then we look what decisions do we have to make. And there are a certain kind of decisions that have to be made in the next years. This should all be in our next national water plan of 2015, so the decisions have to be made in 2013 or 2014. First about our standards of protection. I didn't tell much about it, but we think we are discussing the fact that we might need stricter standards. Now the standard for the western part is an event once in a 10,000 year, but maybe that's not good enough. We have to think what to do about the Rotterdam area. Do we need more of these closure, let's say, barrages? We have to look at the water level of our inner lake. Can it stay like that? Because what happens is that if the sea level is rising, then the water level in the lake is not enough to get water out at low tide, because the low tide is even higher than can be higher than the lake level. So you get a problem, and you can solve that with raising the level of the lake. You can also use big pumps, things like that. There has to be decided on that. Also, what is a problem sometimes in dry periods is that we don't have enough fresh water, that we get problems in our western part with agriculture, so we also have to look at solutions for that. And also, how should we go on with our spatial planning in the future? So I think that's more or less the lessons that we learned during all these centuries, you could say, that integrated water resource management means that the river should be treated in an integrated way. What we also think is there should be, as good as possible, one organization responsible for decision-making process, and good communication and stakeholder involvement are vital. One of the most important relations is, as I said, are the relations between water management and spatial planning. And well, we should look at the natural way of water management, and also good water governance, let's say, is very important. So we should not only focus on the technical aspects and on the models, but also on the behavior and on the cooperation and working together. And this is about the Water Governance Center what I work for. So this is what I had to tell you about lessons learned in the Netherlands on water management. Thank you.